Hello, I'm with Miss June, and I met Miss June many years ago when my son was a baby, so probably 16, 15 years ago. And she was instrumental in helping me with my thyroid nodules and told me about iodine, which wasn't very common in those days. It's still not very common, but I was wondering if you could share with us about iodine.
To start with, I grew up with these little tincture of iodine bottles that had a skull and crossbone on it. And I was like, I thought iodine was poison.
Right.
You know?
And many people do, right?
Yeah. And then I bought a book that was the big book of all the minerals. It was like an encyclopedic book on minerals.
Okay.
And there was a story in there that said researchers deprived female rats of iodine and they all developed lesions on their mammary glands that was just like human fibrocystic breast disease.
Wow.
When they returned iodine to their diet, these things went away spontaneously.
Wow.
So my first positive thing with iodine was when our son was about 20, he developed a growth on his lower lip, on the inside of his lower lip, that looked just like a pink pencil eraser.
Wow.
And it felt about like that. It was kind of a hard fibrous tissue. So he went to the doctor and the doctor removed it and biopsied it and says, "You're cured." You know,
Right.
About 2 weeks later, the thing was back bigger than ever.
Okay.
So he goes back to the doctor, and the doctor says, "Well, I'll remove it again. This time I won't charge you, and it shouldn't come back." It did.
Wow.
Bigger than ever. And I said, "What did the doctor say?" And he said the biopsy said it was a fibroid cyst, a benign fibroid cyst.
Okay.
And I thought, that sounds suspiciously like fibrocystic breast disease. And this is, like 25 years ago or more, because he's almost 50 now. So it would have been almost 30 years ago. The only way I could find iodine was kelp. I didn't know that kelp was high in iodine.
Mm-hmm.
So I bought him a bottle of kelp, and he took about 6 kelp pills a day.
Oh, wow.
And by golly, that thing was gone in a week.
Wow.
That is just the most incredible thing. It's like, that is a miracle. So then I suffered with fibrocystic breast disease myself for decades. And I had 2 lumpectomies.
Oh, wow.
Both of them were benign.
Okay, good.
But one of them, they took a piece of tissue about the size of a golf ball. So I was paranoid about breast cancer. Besides that, one of my sisters had breast cancer.
Okay.
And my breasts were so painful, I couldn't sleep on my stomach sometimes.
Oh.
And I like to sleep on my stomach. So anyway, something weird happened. I don't know if you remember this cassette that was going around about 30 years ago called Dead Doctors Don't Lie.
Yes.
Well, I listened to that, and this guy that I used to cut his hair, he was selling these colloidal minerals.
Okay.
And so I started taking minerals. And one day I'm like, my breasts aren't sore anymore. Wow, this is cool.
Okay.
So that was the second thing that I had about iodine. These minerals didn't specifically say they're rich in iodine, but they were very strong minerals. Okay?
Right.
They were expensive too.
Okay.
Probably more expensive than they needed to be. So that was going on. And then when I ran out of these minerals, I just went without taking anything for months. And one day I found a lump.
Oh no.
Uh-oh.
Not again.
And I had given up on mammograms because my sister that had breast cancer had a negative mammogram while she had very active breast cancer.
Wow.
There's something most people don't know. The worst, most dangerous kinds of breast cancer do not show up on mammograms, but the kind that really probably aren't going to do any harm will show up, and they're just harmless little calcium deposits.
Okay.
Then all of a sudden these healthy women become breast cancer patients.
Right.
Sadly. So anyway, so I went to the doctor, and he used to live next door, so I had to do what I was told, and he insisted that I get a mammogram. So I got a mammogram, but I had to wait like 2 weeks to get scheduled. In the meantime, I went to the health food store and bought a bottle of kelp.
Okay.
And I started taking just a few pills a day.
Right.
And when I went in for the mammogram, nobody could find the lump. It was gone. It didn't show up in the x-ray. You couldn't feel it. And they even did an ultrasound, and it was gone.
Wow.
Just
in 2
with
weeks.
kelp.
Wow. And that wasn't even the iodine drops.
Then I stumbled across this book called Iodine, Why You Need It, Why You Can't Live Without It, by David Brownstein. And I read that, and I thought, this is just before my sister died. And I thought, oh God, I wish I'd had this book, 5 years ago, and she would still be alive, I think.
Right, right. So,
but it is what it is.
Can you tell us why iodine is so important?
Every cell in your body needs iodine. And also, it kills funguses and bacteria. And people that believe in evolution think that iodine was, that these funguses and bacteria were not around at the same time, and they didn't have a chance to build up an immunity to iodine.
Okay.
So anyway, they didn't recognize iodine as something that they had to look out for. Okay, that's the best I can explain. Well, when I got this book, and I realized that Lugol's iodine was probably a really good thing, I started taking it. Yeah. I ordered this on the internet, and I started taking it. When I first got it, I got it from Swanson, that mail order.
Right.
It's a good company. So, and then my friend and client Beverly Lewis had a partial goiter. At one time she had a full goiter, but she had half of it removed, and so you could visually see that half goiter on her left side. I could look. I said, "What is that?"
Right.
And she said, "That's a goiter." She said, "I had that surgery, but I only had half of my goiter removed."
Oh, wow.
And they were treating her with that kind of thyroid that's natural, armor thyroid.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they were treating her with.
Right.
Okay. And at this point, there was a bunch of stuff on the internet by Dr. Guy Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
And he was kind of a buddy of Dr. Brownstein. And he did a lot of research, and he was paid to do a study, a 15-year study called the Iodine Project. And he did a lot of testing and research. He was actually an obstetrician that was a medical school doctor. I mean, he was a doctor in medical school, so he taught medical school, and he really got into this iodine thing, and there were pages and pages of stuff by Dr. Guy Abraham on the internet. And so I read all that, And I downloaded a bunch of it and printed out a bunch of it, and I gave it to Beverly because I saw her about once a month because I cut her hair.
Right.
And so they started going to College Pharmacy, which is a compounding pharmacy, and they think
Right,
outside
over
the
there.
box, and they're more likely to have things you really need than Walgreens, you know.
Right.
So she went to College Pharmacy, and I don't know if she got this brand, but she started taking Iodoral, which is basically, this is the pill form of this.
Right.
This tastes like iodine,
And it's a very strong taste.
and this doesn't taste like anything. This costs a lot less than this, so I take this because I'm cheap.
And how much do you take?
Well, you know, I kind of got lazy about it.
Okay.
And so I kind of cut way back on taking it. And then recently I started taking more of it again, which I would take mostly of a dropper full, which would be roughly 10 drops. But I'll tell you another story about this.
Okay.
Another very positive story. I got several more. I had some teeth extracted, which was a huge mistake. I was freaked out about root canals, and so I had 2 teeth extracted at once. And that's probably not a good idea.
That's a lot on
and
your body.
sometimes your gums react in a very bad way when that happens, and they grow these horny growths.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like your body is trying to regrow teeth. The problem is they aren't teeth and they're not in the right place.
Right.
They're just a nuisance.
Right.
And they hurt, and I was getting all this extensive permanent bridge work, and I can't have these bones growing out of the sides of my mouth when I'm going to have all this bridge work. So I upped that. I started taking a lot.
Okay, so you were doing 10 drops.
I upped it to at least 10 drops a day, and at that point I was probably taking like 2 drops a day when I thought of it, you know.
Okay.
As long as I didn't have lumpy breasts, I'm good to go, right? So it wasn't long that I noticed those things seemed to be shrinking. Within a month and a half, they were gone.
Wow.
As in gone.
Okay.
And I thought, you know, there's something about problems with the mouth that iodine fixes.
Mm-hmm.
So we're visiting my husband's twin brother that lives in Iowa. And his wife and I were talking, and I am telling her this iodine story because I'm one of these wake the town and tell the people, you know, I'm a people person, and I want to tell everybody everything, you know. So I told her this story about Jack's mouth and about my mouth and about my breath. And she said, I have a friend that I want you to talk to. Would you talk to my friend? And I said, yeah. So she called up Glenda. Glenda came over for coffee. Glenda says, I have had a sore in my mouth that I've had for years. And she says, they remove it and scrape it out, and they say, we don't know what this is, but we know it won't hurt you. Does that make sense? Not really.
No, it keeps going.
So I told her about Jack's growth, and you know, this lady is like an Iowa farm wife or something. So she just went to the health food store and bought a bottle of kelp. And several weeks later, I got a Christmas card from my sister-in-law, and she says, by the way, Glenda's mouth is healed. She says, thank you.
That's great with the kelp.
So even something as simple, as cheap, and as common as kelp can be very beneficial.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was just going to say, I just read the Iodine Crisis, and they talk about that they had different cultures that would have different types of kelp, and they would have people, whatever, they found like these 10 different types in very ancient times. So the people knew that it was important to have in their diet to help, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Kelp is amazing stuff, and sometimes it even tastes good. like if we go to a Chinese restaurant or a Japanese restaurant, I'll order seaweed salad.
Yes.
And I like it, you know.
Yeah, I love that too.
I like it a lot.
So have you heard of anyone with cancer being helped with iodine?
I haven't actually heard that, but I do believe it causes a prevention. I really believe that if all women had high levels of iodine, breast cancer would be a thing of the past. I genuinely believe that. If it would heal and prevent breast lumps, that seems to me like that could be a precancerous situation.
Right.
I mean, I was breast cancer phobic. I had a whole book on cancer, and I just lived in fear because of my sister and, you know.
Right.
So,
okay, but I'm so thankful that you have this so you don't have that fear now. So I wanted to say that you were the one who told me years ago, and I started taking this. You had an extra bottle and you sold it to me. I don't know if you remember, because this was, I'm sure you've talked to a lot of people. You gave me some papers and you said there's not a lot of information about it, but I had thyroid nodules, and they made me do 7 biopsies for possible thyroid cancer. So I started taking this, and I was praying. I was like, I do not want to go through treatments. I don't want to go through any issues. And I started taking this, and I also changed my food and my diet. But the nodules pretty much went to where I was having every 6 months checks to 1 year to 5 years. And then they're like, okay, I think you're good. You don't need to have it checked, because I was able to get it under control. So that really helped. So I did that. And then now, after reading that Iodine Crisis book, I'm now using the Iodoral.
Yeah. It's a lot easier to take high doses with this.
It's easier to do the higher doses, and the flavor of this one's a little bit harder to
my
handle,
brother would
but
take
it is
that
more
and
expensive. Okay, yeah, he would get sick.
I think you're a big baby.
Yes, yeah. So is there anything else that you want to tell us about iodine and why it's so important from my understanding, it's important for all your thyroid, any of your sexual type glands, so your breasts, female organs, male organs. This can really help with those issues.
Specifically iodine, I will say no. I will say every mineral on this planet is somewhat essential, even arsenic. There's a book called Rare Earths, Forbidden Cures.
Okay.
And it's written by the Dead Doctors Don't Lie guy, who's big on minerals.
Okay.
And in Dead Doctors Don't Lie, well, he wrote this other one called Rare Earths, Forbidden Cures. And he talks about how our crop soils have been used up and devitalized over the years. And because of that, we're deficient in all minerals.
Yes.
And the farmers can put NPK in the soil and grow a perfectly beautiful
plant, yeah.
Whatever, you know, and it's devoid of value.
Right.
And so this, I don't know if they would call that a rare earth, but we need all the minerals. And we need lots of this. I don't know why we need lots of this. Maybe it's because we basically are ocean beings. The best source of iodine is ocean.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is interesting. Japan has a very, very low incidence of cancer.
Right.
Japanese people are lean and mean. You don't see very many fat Japanese people. You see lean people, and they're pretty healthy, in spite of the fact that we nuked them twice and they nuked themselves once. And they're still healthy. And they got all this radiation floating around, and they're healthy.
But they eat a lot of seaweed.
That speaks volumes. Their diet is 12 milligrams, not micrograms, 12 milligrams of iodine a day in their eating fish and eating seaweed, whereas our RDA is 150 micrograms. Now remember, a microgram is a thousandth of a milligram. So they're getting thousands of times more iodine in their diet
right.
than our RDA, somebody's wrong.
Right, exactly.
You know? But then there is that thing called the ancestral diet. If you are born and raised in Japan, which is basically islands, your ancestral diet is going to be very fishy.
Right.
Whereas if you're born and raised in Oklahoma, you're not going to have that.
Right.
And so, in all fairness, it could be our ancestral diet needs are vastly different to island dwellers to prairie dwellers.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to argue that point. I know that it works for me, and I'm going to continue to take it. Going back to more high doses, when I found out that Bev was taking basically 25 milligrams, not micrograms, milligrams a day, and she looks wonderful. She's almost as old as I am. She's gorgeous. She's healthy. She's not fat. No goiter, you know.
That's amazing.
So,
yes.
in fact, I put a drop in my dog's water a while ago, and I hope he likes it. I hope he doesn't turn up his snout at it.
So I just want to say with that Iodine Crisis book in closing is that they talked about that there were certain places in the United States where that the soil was very devoid of iodine and people developed goiters, and what they did to bring that back. And then North Carolina, they used to have a tagline of no goiters here because they were close to the ocean. They had the iodine in the soil. So
the
it's really
iodine
fascinating.
state, the license plates, the iodine state.
Right, exactly. So,
another one of my favorite stories is there was a place in China where people were, you know.
Oh, I think it was India. Was it India or China?
No, it's China.
Oh, China. Okay.
China. The farmers' livestock weren't reproducing in a normal way, and there was a high incidence of cretinism. And most people don't know what a cretin is. A cretin is an idiot with all capital letters. It's somebody that just doesn't have any brains hardly.
Okay.
So the government took a barrel of iodine and mounted it above their irrigation canal and dripped the iodine into their irrigation. So their crops that were irrigated with that became iodine rich.
Okay.
And the cattle and the animals that drank water from this canal, can you imagine? They got healthy and they started reproducing in normal ways, and the people started having babies that weren't crazy.
Right.
What a concept.
Oh my goodness, it's amazing because just that little area didn't have enough
Yeah,
iodine.
I like that a lot.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for making that huge difference in my life years ago.
Well, thank you for listening to me. Not
Yes.
everybody does. I said, there she goes again.
No, I listen, and you know what? It has changed my life, and now I don't have those goiters, and I wanted to have another baby, and I'm so grateful to you. So thank you.
Okay, well,
Thanks.
thank you for listening.
You're welcome.
We're born with 2 ears and 1 mouth. That should tell us something.
Right, exactly.